What's up, everybody? So, it's been a little bit since the Deathwatch Codex came out, but I've only recently gotten my hands on it. So, I want to go over my thoughts on what the Codex brings to the table in terms of the army list, its flavor, some things I don't like about it, the things that I particularly like about it, and overall impressions on it. Because anytime the Space Marines get something, I'm always interested in being a Space Marine fan, but non-Space Marine players tend to roll their eyes and get a little annoyed, and I understand it. Space Marines are super popular, very successful. They have plenty of stuff already. Why constantly put out stuff for them? Why not support the other factions? And I completely agree with that statement, that thought process. I agree with all that. But I feel if they're going to produce something for Space Marines, it better feel like it belongs completely. And ultimately, I feel the Deathwatch Codex definitely feels like it belongs. Now, I enjoy the Deathwatch, but we've only ever really been, experiencing them before the Codex in small doses, and that's kind of still how I prefer them. Being the elite kill team that is behind enemy lines while the main battle's going on, or supporting the main battle line with their alien killing expertise. That's how they've been portrayed in the fluff for the longest time. That's how they're portrayed in Black Library novels. That's how we had access to them officially back in 4th edition with the Deathwatch Kill Team PDF. So, a full on codex was, in my opinion, a big step for Deathwatch. It got me thinking, how are they going to keep the Deathwatch feel while giving us the capability to make a full on army? And I think they did that. So, the way the codex is how they do it, I guess. But the thing about the Deathwatch for me is, and I think a lot of people, is they're kind of like Special Forces Space Marines, Spec Up Space Marine feel. They are veteran Space Marines from a multitude of chapters. So if you don't know the fluff about Deathwatch too much, I'm not really going to jump into it here. The Codex does a good job with it. But basically, they are veteran Space Marines from a multitude of different chapters that are seconded, which means they're loaned out to the Ordo Xenos to fulfill uh, basically an obligation to provide them with military might. So a space marine or two or several are loaned out at any given time from a lot of the space marine chapters, and it's a mutually beneficial thing. The Auto Xenos gets a powerful chamber militant in the form of the Death Watch that's already well trained and have great equipment that they can maintain. And in exchange, the Space Marines learn even further the methodologies and capability of warfare against the Xenos threats, and should they survive and return to their chapter, they bring that with them. So that's the idea behind it. And as a result, you get this Special Forces vibe, because you have an elite strike force of Space Marines at the Ordo Xenos' command. And on top of that, they get outfitted with extra equipment and specialized equipment, all of which are in the Deathwatch Codex. So it definitely keeps that vibe, in my opinion, of a Special Forces Space Marine type of feel. And considering that they are limited in the unit entries they have in the Codex, they don't have access to Vindicators or Predators or Land Speeders or Devastators, amongst other things. They have a surgical strike methodology of doing things, which further is reinforcing that Special Forces vibe and feel. They're well equipped, a lot of interesting options, special issue ammunition, basically anywhere there's a bolter. Interesting war gear that's unique to this codex, such as the Infernus Heavy bolter, for example. And with that surgical strike mentality, with this gear and their veteranship, you have a special force, strike force type of vibe going on. And I like that. And it's maintained in the codex on the army list side of things, not just in the fluff, so kudos to them. So that's what you got going on with this codex. And as a result, it gives off a different vibe from the Space Wolves, from the Blood Angels, from the Dark Angels, from the regular Space Marine Codex, and of course the Grey Knights. The Grey Knights are a whole different mess. I never really include them when I talk about standard Space Marine stuff because they're uniquely their own thing. So that'll be my last mentioning of them in this ramble, talking about the Death Watch. So I think they did a good job with that, and because of that, I feel it definitely is a codex that should stick around for the long run for Space Marines. It's a different way to play from what we have thus far, and that's why it works, in my opinion. That's why I view it. People may view it differently. But with that said, it's by no means a perfect codex. No codex is. But for me, there are things that I kind of nitpick or that I kind of have a kind of a negative viewpoint on that this codex does. First of which is the lack of options for the Watchmaster. Now, when you read the fluff up on the Watchmaster in the codex, I kind of get it. How he's equipped is basically like this symbolizes his badge of office, if you will. But at the same time, he's kind of the chapter master equivalent, and he's very limited in war gear options. Only can take special issue war gear or relics of the Vigilant, which is their relics of this codex. And I just feel like that's not enough. Why can't he take a jump pack? Granted, he's got Artificer armor standard, so he doesn't need Terminator armor, but some people want their HQs in Terminator armor. Aesthetically, plus Terminator armor can do certain things, potentially a little different than Artificer armor can, and so on, so why not? He's got a Guardian Spear standard, Artificer armor, and an Iron Halo, and a Clavis, so he's pretty well equipped right out the gate, but still, what if you want to give him a plasma pistol? What if you wanted to give him whatever else? You can't. It just feels odd, especially when you look at the Watch Captain, who is full of options. I would have preferred more options for the Watchmaster. The lack of option he has is a little bit disappointing to me. Still like the unit, though, or the entry. Also, this codex in the armor list section does not have any apothecaries or tech marines. Now, you could say that they're really specialized space marines that the chapters need to function properly. And I get that, and that could be kind of the reasoning why you don't see them in this codex. We see them in the Deathwatch tabletop RPG, but you can't compare an RPG to a miniature war game. That's apples and oranges. Or really, it's like apples and chicken. Very different. But with that said, librarians and chaplains are a precious commodity to chapters as well, and they are seconded to the Deathwatch, so why can't tech marines or apothecaries be seconded? And it kind of logistically makes sense. You have dreadnoughts, you have terminators, you have vehicles, things in the Space Marine arsenal that would necessitate a tech marine's hand. And the tech marines are mentioned in the fluff as maintaining this stuff, but they're not in the army list section, which is a little weird for me. No apothecary either. You think you want to keep your marines in tip-top shape, and I could definitely see an apothecary being a squad upgrade option for their troop choice, which it's not, because they're not in the codex. It doesn't make or break anything. It's not like, oh, these aren't here, so it's terrible. It's just something I would have preferred to see, personally, just for making sense. But we don't have it. Not the end of the world, not the biggest of deals, but something I would have liked to see. Outside of that, in all honesty, there isn't really much else that I have as a con in this codex for me, personally. I particularly like, for example, their Black Spear Strike Force. You can have a Venerable Dreadnought leading it, so that's kind of cool if you want a Dreadnought HQ. There you go, basically. I like their war gear options, such as the Infernus Heavy Bolter, the Xenophase Blade, the Shotgun. It all leads to that Special Forces vibe. The Auxiliary Melt-A-Gun Power Fist combination for Terminators, if you want it, is also really cool. So again, really nice stuff going on there to give that Special Forces vibe. I like the Black Shield being a squad upgrade for their troop choice. Just an extra bit of Deathwatch fluff that is incorporated into the army is always cool. So overall, I really like what's going on with what you have access to and the options for in this codex. There are no special characters in this codex, if you're wondering. In terms of any named special characters, none within the codex itself. I know a box game, or the box games have some characters in there, but none in the codex proper, and I like that. Nothing against special characters, I like them, but I also like the fact where it's like, here, just make your HQ, you'll be fine. I like that as well. So overall, I think handled very well how the codex was laid out in the army list section. Not having access to certain things really helps with the Special Forces vibe, in combination with their surgical strike mentality and their war gear options, and the fact that, your basic troop choice as a veteran also is pretty helpful. I think it all leads to that special force, special ops mentality. And, outside of just the fit and finish of the army list feeling different from other Space Marine army lists out there, the fact that they don't have access to certain things that maybe you might have used, let's say you play Ultramarines or Predators. You don't have Predators in this codex. So now whatever you use a Predator for as an answer to a threat, you now have to figure out how to answer that threat without it. Not everybody is going to use a Predator or Vindicator or what have you, but plenty of people do use at least one of those or use something that the Deathwatch don't have access to. So it's a whole different mindset in terms of how you're going to answer the threat that you don't have the unit to answer for anymore. And I like that. I mean, it further reinforces that the Deathwatch, while appearing very similar to a Space Marine chapter, is also radically different from a standard Space Marine force. And I like that. So, really, I think while it does a great job representing Deathwatch, clearly with the fluff and the gallery of images, both artwork and photos, and of course the army list, I think it's also a really good option for the players who want to make their own force or do something in the Counts As department. The Counts As department is strong, especially in Space Marines. And when I say strong, I mean it's popular. That's what I mean by strong. And the Deathwatch offers a whole different kind of lens of which you can view your DIY force through. You know, that might be something attractive to you. It's attractive to me, I can tell you that much. So it's yet another thing in that DIY Counts As arsenal. But outside of even DIY, there are potentially official Space Marine chapters where maybe the Deathwatch loadout in terms of war gear and the way they do things would make sense. And that's what I like about the Deathwatch Codex overall. Yes, they're alien hunters extraordinaire, and a lot of their warlord traits or mission stuff kind of plays into that, but it's not so specific where if you're going up against traitor guards, for example, you're lacking in anything necessarily. So even with that being the case, you could do your own force and have the Deathwatch stuff make sense on the whole. Or you can do an official force where you think the Deathwatch Codex is a better way to represent them. One thing that jumps out in my mind is the Mentors Space Marine chapter. They were requested for an at-a-glance, so I'll go into their fluff there and whatnot, but they do R&D and field test weapons a lot. I'll just say that here. So having access to some of the atypical war gear options that the Deathwatch have access to can make a lot of sense for the Mentors. The way they do warfare and the way that they view things and do things as well, I feel could make good use of the Deathwatch Codex. They could easily make use of the regular Space Marine Codex and be fine also, but the Deathwatch Codex could also work for them. So it's an optional way to play an official Space Marine force, in my opinion. You may feel that there's another Space Marine force, maybe the Seal Confessors, you might think would fit in here, being all kind of like tied to the Mechanicum and therefore possibly having access to tech that a chapter that isn't tied to the Mechanicum wouldn't have, and so on. So I like that little plot hook concept. If you think outside the box a little bit, look at some of the official chapters out there, this codex might be something you would use in place of the regular Space Marine Codex or what have you. Maybe, maybe not. It's all up to your opinion. But having that as an option is cool, and that's why I really enjoy the Deathwatch Codex the way it's laid out. I think they did a good job with it. So that's my thoughts on the Codex. I think it's doing well for itself. I like it. I haven't really touched upon powerhouse units or things that might be considered OP or need buffing or what have you, because that's really a frame of personal preference and depending upon how you view it versus what you're fighting against and so on. It's not worth bringing up really in that capacity of initial impressions. But basically, I enjoy the Codex. I think for some people out there, this may be the way you're going to collect your Space Marine chapter or an official Space Marine chapter that you feel fits in with the tech and the Strike Force mentality of this Codex. I think if you're willing to have a little bit of fun that way, I think a little bit outside the box, this can work. Some people are going to be, well, they're all veterans, so it doesn't make sense. And I get some people's opinions, but I feel in the spirit of the game and enjoying yourself and having fun, it definitely could work. Anyways, with that said, I've rambled on long enough and repeated myself multiple times. So thanks for sticking through it. Hopefully you found it enjoyable. Share your thoughts on the Deathwatch Codex. And if you have any questions, comments, or requests, leave them in the comment section. And until next time, take it easy.